Hello and welcome back to the Nine Sports Podcast Hockey Edition. I'm your host, Maya Smith. Today's episode was intended to be primarily an NCAA Frozen Four, Patty Kazmaier, all things focused on that. For this episode, I have fantastic guests joining me, Emma Sullivan and Giselle Valazquez, who lead the NCAA coverage here at the Ice Garden. But just after we recorded that segment, there was a trade. So let's just jump into the number one at the nine, your top headline of the week. So the number one at the nine is that the Boston Fleet have acquired Jessie Eldridge from the Seattle Torrent in exchange for Teresa Schaftzal. This is a trade that brings scoring to Boston. Jessie Eldridge will rank third among scorers on the Boston Fleet, something that they desperately need as they've really been relying on one or two goals a game and very, very strong goaltending in order to get them to where they are, which is having a very successful season. But sometimes when you get to the playoffs, you need a little bit more than that. For the Fleet, they get a veteran player in Teresa Schaftzal. She would rank about seventh in their scoring, which has led most people to believe that they did not make this decision for scoring reasons. Both teams are dealing with a lot of injuries, some of which may be long-term but have yet to be announced. It makes a lot of sense for the Boston Fleet. Jessie Eldridge is a very strong player. She has been great in Seattle, and she was great in New York, where she played until the expansion draft. But there are definitely some questions about why the Seattle Torrent would make this trade, and I think the reality of that is yet to be determined. I assume there will be more analysis, more discussion with members of the Seattle Torrent and their front office, and more analysis to come. But this trade was announced last night when I'm recording this Monday night. So that is the breaking news. Jessie Eldridge now plays for the Fleet, which if you wanted to make the playoffs, that's fantastic. They will likely be in the playoffs, and the Seattle Torrent, well, that is yet to be seen. So stay tuned to the Ice Garden for more analysis on the trade from both the Boston Fleet side of things and the Seattle Torrent side of things. Now, let's jump into our Frozen 4 preview and our Patty Kaz analysis with Giselle Valazquez and Emma Sullivan. All right, so Giselle and Emma are here to talk about the Frozen 4, which is happening this upcoming weekend. Welcome to the pod. I'm very excited to have you both here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us, Maya.
I'm really excited because maybe I won't sound as stupid in this episode as I did last week when I was like just learning these things. I feel like I have a little bit of a better understanding, but you guys are the experts, so we'll be covered off. So as I mentioned before, the four teams that are playing in the Frozen Four: Northeastern, Penn State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. Ohio State, it's their sixth straight Frozen Four. They're the defending runners-up. Wisconsin won last year. Penn State is at their first Frozen Four, I believe, and then Northeastern, which is Emma's school, so I feel like we'll have a lot to say about that. They were the last there in 2023. So first thing I want to ask you guys is this what you were expecting the Frozen Four would look like?
No, I honestly, what I feel like the Penn State UConn matchup was more of a something that I could have gone either or with the teams. I really, when I was looking at that game, I was looking more at the goalies, and so I was kind of looking at it as like it was going to be a goalie duel, and whoever got that first goal was going to be the winner, essentially. And it kind of did happen like that. So, but I really thought that one could be like a flip of a coin. It didn't really seem like I was rooting for one score or the other. Wisconsin, I kind of thought Quinnipiac would put up more of a fight, and so I was very surprised by that final result. And then with Ohio State, I figured I wanted to give Yale a lot more credit, and I wanted to see a lot more out of them, but I figured Ohio State would make it through. And then Northeastern, I looked at it in two different ways. I think Northeastern is very talented. When I looked up the school and I looked up the stats, I was blown away by it because I only cover the WCHA and AHA. But then kind of looking at Minnesota, I thought they were going to probably get it together by the time we got to this part of the playoffs, and it just seemed like they just kept fizzling out constantly. So I think with that one, I probably was leaning more towards Northeastern, but thinking that Minnesota would have put up more than what they did in that game. So really, it seemed like I was really seeing Wisconsin, Ohio State, and the other two games are going to be more leaning towards one way a little bit, or leaning no way at all with Penn State and UConn.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think a lot of the time we talk so much about the WCHA and the ECAC as the top two conferences in the country. And I think a lot of the teams this year have proven that that's not really the case anymore. Especially with these Hockey East schools. It's the first time Hockey East has sent two teams to the national tournament since back in 2021, which is when 3 teams made it. And then, of course, with Penn State, the AHA hasn't had a team advance this far in a hot minute. So to see them get a chance to play at the Frozen Four in their own barn is going to be really special for them. And as you were saying, Giselle, I think those two matchups were pretty evenly. When you look at them on paper, you've got, as you said, Katie Disa and Tia Chan are two of the best goaltenders in the NCAA. And then you look at the way that Minnesota's offense has been performing compared to the way Northeastern can defend. And those two teams match up pretty well. But it came down to who jumped out first in all 4 of those games, to be quite honest. And as you said, Quinnipiac and Yale, they looked so solid for so much of this season. I was surprised that those games ended up being 5-1 and 6-0. And also just Northeastern jumping out to a 3-0 lead and chasing Hannah Clark within 15 minutes of the first period is not something I think was on anyone's bingo card. So it definitely wasn't what I was totally expecting. And I think even going back to the beginning of the season, we looked at teams like Cornell, Colgate, Clarkson. Like, those are teams that have been at the top of the NCAA for a long time now. And while those 3 have taken a major step back this season, none of them, I believe, made the tournament even. I think we all expected at least one ECAC school to make it and maybe a third WCHA team to make it because, of course, Ohio State and Wisconsin kind of seem like the auto bids to the Frozen Four at this point. But no, going into the tournament 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have been able to predict this. And going into the season, I definitely would have predicted at least 2 of the 4 teams who made it to Penn State this week.
Do you think that that's because, like, the competition is, like, the players in these other schools are getting stronger, or the WCHA schools are getting not weaker necessarily, because we know they have some fantastic players, but why do you think that we're seeing such kind of like different schools getting that chance?
I think I said this during one of the games on the other day, was that I feel like I think it was with Northeastern Minnesota. I kind of felt like Northeastern wasn't a team that Minnesota had really come across, like a team that plays the way that Northeastern does. I don't think they had come across a team like that really much at all this season, because even when they were playing out of conference games, it felt like they were going up against teams that were a little bit weaker, probably weren't matched up well with against like Minnesota. And so it just kind of felt like Northeastern, especially like Emma said, they chased Minnesota's Hannah Clark out of net within 15 minutes. They had 3-0 lead. Minnesota wasn't able to score till towards the end of the game. In the last 5 minutes, they had 2 goals by Abbey Murphy. So I feel like they were just probably like shocked by the way that Northeastern plays, just the way they take the ice. I mean, there were so many different things about them that just stood out to me from watching those games. And I kind of feel like, besides the fact that like Minnesota was kind of sliding towards the end of the season, even in the playoffs, the WCHA conference playoffs, they started off with a loss, which doesn't really like, I think this was the 3rd straight year they went to game 3. The first round of those playoffs are best out of 3. And it just kind of felt like once they got into this lower end of the season, they just weren't as great as they had been in years past. Every team goes through ebbs and flows, has hiccups, things of that sort. But I felt like Minnesota never really kind of got out of that kind of out of those lows. And so with Northeastern, I just think they met such a hot team, such a well-rounded team, somebody who came into this playoffs with just this determination to keep going. And I feel like with Minnesota, they kind of just fell flat against them. And so I feel like they just had not met a team like Northeastern, the way that they play. And that really just kind of took them out of it pretty early.
Going off of that, I also just think that the way the conferences play is very different. A lot of the things that you see in Hockey East is more of a defensive-minded structure. You see these goaltenders that all have save percentages over .935 with Chan, Lisa Jensen from Northeastern, Abby Hornung from Holy Cross. the defensive structure in Hockey East is, I think, a little bit more emphasized than it might be in the WCHA, which is all offense all the time. And then running into a goaltender who is used to facing a lot of shots, who's used to playing behind defenses that know how to clear the puck out, it's a little bit of a challenge to try and pick those places to score on. And as you said, Abbey Murphy scored 2 goals. Both of those were with a player and a 2-player advantage late in the game. They couldn't solve Northeastern at even strength the entirety of the game, and they had their chances. There were a lot of calls against the Huskies that benefited Minnesota, and they just couldn't find a way to convert the way that I think they're used to against some of the other teams in the WCHA. And we saw it, how they were unable to score against St. Cloud in that 1-0 win for the Huskies in that opening game of the WCHA playoffs. So I think it's just a matter of, while the out-of-conference schedule can help some teams in terms of getting those wins in and playing different teams from different conferences, it really does matter who you schedule. And for Northeastern, they played they played Penn State back in November. They played Yale. They played Quinnipiac. They played teams that made the tournament. And of course, Minnesota has experience playing against Ohio State, Wisconsin, Minnesota Duluth, who also made the tournament as well. So they have that experience. It's just a matter of how much experience are you getting against teams who don't play the same style as you, and being prepared to adjust your game plan. And I just don't think that all the time the adjustments that were made for any of the teams in the tournament benefited them potentially the way that they wanted it to. And of course, like, going down by so many goals for Quinnipiac, for Yale, even for Princeton, we saw them down 3-1 against UConn in the opening round. Like, it's tough to battle back in games like this when you're playing these teams that know how to defend a lead, they know how to score, and they have the defense and the goaltending to back that up. It's tough when you're not used to finding your ways out of those holes, you know? And with Minnesota, they're so used to outscoring their opponent by however many. I mean, you look at how many goals Abbey Murphy scored, and she didn't even play the whole season. She had 40. So it's always that mindset of, how do you respond? And I think for certain schools that play those tighter games that we see in Hockey East, that we see in the AHA, that we see even sometimes in the ECAC, battling back is a little bit easier. And that's not to say that I think that the WCHA teams don't have that mindset. It's just that when you go down by those goals, it's just a little bit more complicated, because then you start gripping your sticks. You don't know where to find your space on the ice. And I think that really impacted the way Minnesota was playing. They just didn't know how to solve what Northeastern was putting on the table. And I think that's similar for what, honestly, UConn also was feeling with Penn State. But even then, that game was tight until the end. And for Quinnipiac and Yale, I think it's pretty similar as well. So it's just a matter of knowing your opponent and knowing how to battle back when they surprise you. And I think the surprise is what really caught a lot of these teams off guard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the interesting and like cool things about having a tournament like this, where you get to play teams that you don't normally face, is gives you those kind of challenges. So obviously, you know, it's a one game tournament basically to get to the final. Who do you think that the final matchup will be if all goes according to plan?
It's so hard, because I don't want to not give credit to the teams that are in here, right? And so it's like, but I also know Wisconsin and Ohio State so well. But I'm going to say Wisconsin, but I'm going to give it to Northeastern, because I think they're just such a, like Emma has been saying so well, is like, they're just structured so differently. And so I think that, again, like when we talk about how the season has gone, Wisconsin has been has been solid. They've mostly lost to Ohio State. A lot of their losses were to Ohio State, including the conference title game earlier this month. So they kind of, that's kind of their Achilles heel in a way, is like Ohio State, and they've been able to solve them. But I think that they also had a very just not a challenging sort of non-conference schedule. And so I think that if it ends up like that, where it's Wisconsin, Northeastern, they're going to also be surprised, like Minnesota, by the way that Northeastern plays, the way that they're structured and things of that sort. And so I also think that the goaltending on the Northeastern side is a lot stronger than I feel the Wisconsin side is. And so I think that that's why I'm looking at a Wisconsin Northeastern kind of final, because I just feel like you have two WCHA teams. One of them's going to have to fall. One of them's not going to be able to survive one of these other teams and how different they play. And I think that's the Northeastern is like that kind of that beast that's coming in for these playoffs for the Frozen Four. And so in my mind, just by looking at it, I want to give Penn State so much, but I also watched them struggle this season against teams like Mercyhurst and RIT. And those aren't teams that you really, Mercyhurst I understand because they are really great this season, but RIT is a team that I was very confused by why they were kind of struggling against them. And so I think they might end up falling to Wisconsin, but Northeastern, I just kind of feel like I'm just blown away by how they play. And I told Emma this so many times, and I was just in awe of the way that they play. And so I definitely feel like they'll solve Ohio State. Again, I think their goaltending, which is what really stood out against Minnesota, is going to once again stand out against Ohio State.
I think it's pretty tough for me to pick. I would love to see Northeastern in the championship game. I don't think that's a secret for anyone who knows me. It does concern me a little bit, though. Offensively, Northeastern just doesn't seem to have the same fire at will and score that we've seen from Wisconsin, who's averaging over 5 goals a game. Penn State and Ohio State are both averaging over 4. And Northeastern's sitting at that 3 mark per game. And we saw it in the downfall for them in the Hockey East Championship was they couldn't find a way to score against Tia Chan. And it was a 2-1 loss in double overtime. They only were able to score on the power play, which similar to Minnesota that we saw this weekend, they just couldn't find a way to pick their spots, which is my biggest concern for them moving into this weekend. On the flip side, if Ohio State continues to take the amount of penalties that they've been taking all season, I think that is a pretty big detriment. Northeastern has goals on the power play in back-to-back games. We saw Mia Langlois score that game-winning goal against Minnesota on the power play. And I think penalty kill-wise, Northeastern's penalty kill is just one of the best facets of their game. So that gives me a little bit of pause. And, I mean, Ohio State is riding that wave, right? They beat Wisconsin in a WCHA title game that I don't think many people expected it to go their way the way that it did. But at the same time, Northeastern is riding that high of beating Minnesota and beating a WCHA team for the first time in goodness knows how many years. So it's definitely the tried and true team who's been here before. They've been here 6 times against an upstart team from Hockey East that doesn't have as much experience, but has the experience of winning within their conference and within their tournaments in season. So I think it's tough to pick a winner. I don't really know how to pick anyone besides Northeastern. That is the team that I know the best. But Ohio State is just such a force. And then on the flip side with Penn State, I think they can surprise some people. I do think that while they didn't have the offensive numbers against UConn that the other teams had, they still won 3-0. And I think that ability to shut down their opponents that way is going to be pretty critical, especially against a Wisconsin team that is averaging 5 goals a game. But again, it's Wisconsin, and there is no team that is more scary to me and is more scary to, I think, almost everyone than Wisconsin. They are just a force to be reckoned with. Mark Johnson with his 700th career win this past weekend. They've got so many Olympians. They've got Lacey Eden, who didn't make the USA team, should have maybe, who knows? And they've got who I think is the best player in the NCAA in Caroline Harvey. So I don't know. I like what Tessa Janecke has done. I like what Jeff Campersall has done with this Penn State program. I'm just never going to bet against the Badgers. It's just kind of impossible for me to do because of just how solid they've been and how much they've run the show. I mean, we saw last year just how dominant they are. They're not as dominant. They do have those losses, including that loss to Ohio State just a week and a half ago. But, I mean, they're the team to beat. They are always the team to beat. Ohio State is always a team to beat.
That sounds like it's going to make for a very exciting tournament. We're going to talk about Caroline Harvey in a second here with the Patty Kaz, and we're going to get obviously it's a difficult decision about who will win the entire tournament, so I'm going to let you guys off the hook for that. We'll do our top shelf prediction at the end of the Patty Kaz section here, but I just wanted to say that Natalia predicted last week that a Hockey East team would make it to the Frozen Four, and she was correct. So shout out to her because people aren't correct in their predictions. So
If someone had told me a hockey school was going to be in the Frozen Four this year, I would have bet UConn or Northeastern. So those are the two teams I would have picked. Sorry to be you. Those are the two teams that I think made the most sense, and I'm glad at least one of them is here. And so
perfect. Okay, so the Patty Kazmaier Award finalists have been announced: Caroline Harvey, Tessa Janecke, and Abbey Murphy. This is an award for the top Div 1 NCAA player in the country, and the award usually looks at outstanding individual and team skills, sportsmanship, performance in clutch scenarios, personal character, competitiveness, and a love of the game. So before I get you guys to choose who you think should win, would these have been your top 3 choices out of the 10 finalists that they selected?
No.
No. No.
I was waiting for one of us to say it.
No, we had the same thought.
No. I would have had Tia Chan in there. Of UConn. I love goalies. I think Tia is an incredible goaltender. She's had an incredible season. So I would have probably had. I mean, I like Caroline Harvey. I really do like her. She's a great player. She's incredibly talented. And I like Tessa Janecke too. Abbey Murphy, I don't know. I kind of feel like when you really look at like what the award is about, I don't know if we're gonna, really look at Abbey Murphy with she's always leads the WCHA in like penalty minutes and things of that sort. So I mean, if you want to get nitty gritty about that, that's what I'm like, or nitpicky about that. That's what I'm like looking at too. But Lacey Eden, I think also would have probably been there for me, because one of my favorite things is that when the Olympics roster was announced in the beginning of January and Lacey Eden was left off, she went on a heater for the rest of the season that she is still on. I can't remember the number. I wrote it down in one of my previews the other day, but I think she scored almost 40 points since that Olympic roster was announced. And she was just tearing it up. I mean, I think she had like at least 4 points. I don't know how many games. And so she currently has 75 points, including these NCAA playoff games. I mean, that's absurd. She ended up being the scoring champion too, because I mean, it was just such a, she was already talented. She's already so great. She plays on an incredibly talented team. But for her to just kind of take that, and I'm not sure entirely if it really was because she got left off the Olympic roster, but the change was like night and day, and she was just tearing it up against every single school she could go against. And for me, that just speaks of just the talent, the determination, just the skill set that she has that no other school was able to solve, regardless of it was mostly just WCHA play at that point, but even other teams just couldn't solve her. And so that's the thing where it's she was just so lights out, and it just was so incredible to watch and be able to register what she was doing. And so I feel like that was more of why I wanted her to be one of the top 3 finalists, because I just felt like Lacey just pedaled to the metal and just rode the wave of just her talent and showing what she can do. And I don't know, there was something very special about it where it was she was just it was just unbelievable. And so I feel like I would have put her in there, or I would have put Tia Chan in there. I love KK Harvey. I love Tessa Janecke. He was very deserving of it too. I think my third one would have been between Tia Chan or Lacey Eden. But the other two, I think KK Harvey, I don't know. I feel like she's already a pro player is what she seems like to me, because of the way that she plays too. She's on a great team, but she just has this edge to her game that's incredible to see, and just high hockey IQ as well. And then Tessa Janecke, for still being part of Penn State, who is still considered an up and coming program. She broke so many records this season by herself, but she's also really good at setting up her other teammates. So I put in my preview the other day that you can shut down Tessa Janecke, but she's still going to help out her other teammates and get them to be able to score. And so that's the thing about her, is that she's also just so talented where, she has a lot of points. Yeah, she's a leading scorer, but also she's setting up the rest of her teammates to be able to score too. So you have to shut her down completely. And I think having that kind of player is just very interesting and really awesome. And also just the love that she has for Penn State, the love that she has for the program, how much she's grown because of it. I feel also just and the love she has for the sport. she's also an Olympian, and so gold medalist. But it just feels like she really embodies what Patty Kazmaier Award is all about, and I think KK does as well. And so, yeah, those two I love. I would have either thrown in Tia Chan as a goaltender. You want to give goalies love, because nothing that they do is easy, comes naturally, comes without so much effort. Or Lacey Eden for just going on a tear that I don't think anybody would have imagined or predicted or anything of that sort.
I agree with Lacey Eden. I think she's just been absolutely dominating every facet of the game. I do think Caroline Harvey makes the most sense. And if she leaves college without winning a Patty Kazmaier, I think it's just kind of absurd to think about. She has been the best player every time she steps on the ice for well over 2 years now. And we've seen it. She played on the U.S. Olympic team in 22. She was the Olympic MVP just last month. Like, she is, as you said, a pro playing in the NCAA already. I would have liked for Kaylin LaMarche to get a little bit more love out of the ECAC. It's not often that we see 40 goal scorers, let alone a 40 goal scorer, come out of the ECAC, and she was so important to everything that Quinnipiac was able to accomplish alongside Felicia Frank, their netminder. So I think her not being in the top 3 does give me a little bit of a pause. She didn't win ECAC Player of the Year, however. That went to Sarah Maness, I believe I'm saying that correctly, from Clarkson, who also won their Rookie of the Year. So that did kind of impact Kaylin LaMarche's campaign a little bit. I do agree about Abbey Murphy's penalty minutes. Tessa Janecke is also a heavily penalized player in the AHA, which I do think should have gotten a little bit more of a look. But when you look at the top 3, there's always going to be the argument of they didn't play the whole season. They took the month to go play at the Olympics. Whoa, the Olympics, nothing too crazy, right? But what they were all able to accomplish with those 6 weeks of not playing in the NCAA is absurd. Like, they are just – Abbey Murphy finished second in the scoring race behind Lacey Eden by only, I think, about 10 or so points. And she didn't play those games that – all the same amount of games that Lacey Eden played. Caroline Harvey, as a defender, played not as many games, still was the top scoring defender in the NCAA. And Tessa Janecke, as you said, the way that she is able to power Penn State and what she is able to do in the face-off dot especially is something that's really critical. So while I understand the 3, I do wish Kaylin LaMarche had gotten a little bit more attention. I also wish that maybe another Hockey East player had been named to the top 10 overall. I think Tia Chan is very deserving. It is a little odd to me that only one goaltender was named to the top 10. I think there have been some cases, whether that's Felicia Frank out of Yale, out of Quinnipiac, names like that. I think there might have been a little bit of space for potentially another goalie, potentially another player out of an Eastern Conference. But I think if you look at the top 10 and you look at that top 3, it makes a lot of sense. I just personally think LaMarche had just an outstanding season, and what she was able to contribute to her team, especially, is like Quinnipiac has a lot of weapons. LaMarche is the main one. And I think Wisconsin has a lot of weapons, but again, Lacey Eden, Layla Edwards also in the top 10, Harvey, they have a lot of players in the top 10 who contribute throughout the lineup. The same thing for Minnesota, if you look at who they have, both on the blue line and offensively up front. I think it's tough to not look at the individual performances from some of these teams. But at the end of the day, the 3 make sense to me. They wouldn't be who I picked, but after looking at it, I do understand a little bit better of why the committee went this way. I do wish that penalty minutes were taken into a little bit more consideration, but at the end of the day, these are 3 Olympians who won a gold medal in Milan a month ago. So it doesn't entirely surprise me, especially with just how much they are able to do and what they were able to do throughout their 4 or 5, in Murphy's cases, years at the Division I level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you had to pick who takes the Patty Kaz this year, Emma, I'm going to go to you first.
Caroline Harvey. I think I've been kind of on that train for a large part of the year, if not especially the last couple of weeks. It's tough to find a player who has done more throughout their career who doesn't get nominated, who doesn't win the Best Player Award. I think she could have won it any year that she was playing. She's been a top 10 finalist now 3 times, a top 10 finalist 3 times, a top 3 finalist twice, back-to-back years. She's magic. And I mean, the Olympics don't have an impact here, but her play as a blue liner speaks for itself. And she's just she's out of this world. There's nothing that I can say that we don't know about KK Harvey. She is just so talented. And I think if she graduates without winning a Patty Kazmaier, it's going to be one of the most shocking things to me. And I think for me, it's a no-brainer that I think all three are very talented. I think Caroline Harvey stands above, half a step above. Not a full one, but half.
Yeah. All right, Giselle, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be kind of weird to not say KK just because she's so incredibly talented. Like Emma said, just it kind of feels like it wouldn't make sense if it wasn't her. She's just that player, and she's such a game changer, and she just really changes the team dynamic and the games when she's there on the ice and stuff. And there's just something about her, just the way that she sees the game, that it really wouldn't make sense if you are giving out this award to the best player in the NCAA that you wouldn't give it to KK. And like Emma said, yeah, the Olympics don't play a part, but she's just that player. She's incredible. And I feel like Emma took the words out of my mouth because she really is magic. And so yeah, definitely KK. No, I'm rooting for all of them, and I was rooting for all the top 10 anyways, but KK, just you see that name and you're like, well, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's all three of them, but she's going to be fantastic in the PWHL next year. Whatever team gets her will be definitely getting a star player for the rest of her career. Amazing. Thank you both so much for joining me and bringing all of your knowledge. And you both and the other people that have been kind of helping out have been doing amazing work on NCAA coverage all year, but especially right now with the playoffs. So thank you both for your hard work. Where can people find you after the podcast?
You can find me on the internet. My social media handles are @EmptyRink, and I write about college hockey, both men's and women's. And I love it so much. And so I have a lot of feature stories in the works. I have a lot of feature stories already done. A lot of Olympics work if you want to learn more about the Olympics. But yeah, follow me on there. I have terrible takes and a lot of opinions, but and then I make fun of a lot of teams. It's probably not the best habit, but I hope I make you laugh.
Definitely.
I think they're great takes, Giselle, for what it's worth.
Me too.
You can find me at EmmaSull02 on all social media platforms, or also at theicegarden.com, covering mainly Hockey East and the NCAA, with a little bit of Team Switzerland internationally mixed in there. I will be at the Frozen Four this weekend for my day job, so that'll be fun. And I'll be posting some content, hopefully, from there. And yeah, thank you so much for having us, Maya. This was great.
Thanks,
awesome.
Maya.
Thank you
Appreciate
both,
it.
and have a great time at the tournament, and we'll chat with you guys later. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that you learned a lot about the NCAA, or if you already knew, you are set and ready to go for this upcoming weekend, the Frozen Four, the most important time of year for college players. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or follow on your favorite podcast platform so you get all of the 9 Sports podcasts in your feed. And if you are able to, you can purchase a subscription to the 9 Sports to get all of your sports in one place. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.